Head covering. Paul tells women to cover their heads in church and on the surface. That sounds like a strange, controlling rule with no real logic behind it. But Paul was writing to the church in Corinth, and in that ancient city, an uncovered head on a woman was a loaded social signal. It wasn't a neutral fashion choice the way it would be today. In Corinth, it was a public symbol of sexual availability, of rebellion against marriage, of moral looseness. It carried enormous meaning in that culture, the same way certain symbols carry weight today without needing an explanation. So when Paul gave that instruction, he wasn't policing women's clothing. He was protecting their reputation in a culture that would have completely misread an uncovered head. Understanding that context doesn't just change the tone of the passage, it flips the entire meaning. Paul wasn't restricting women, he was defending them. Turn the other cheek. This teaching gets misread constantly, and the misreading turns it into a call for passivity, for absorbing every insult and every injustice with a weak smile and zero pushback. That's not what Jesus was saying. When Jesus taught people to turn the other cheek, he was speaking specifically about personal revenge, about the deep human urge to retaliate, to make sure the person who hurt you suffers for it. That's the impulse he was cutting off at the root. Not the ability to remove yourself from harm, but the hunger for payback. The Orthodox understanding of this teaching has always pointed towards something deeper than just not retaliating. It points toward active forgiveness, toward praying for the person who wronged you, toward bearing difficulty with patience, rather than immediately reaching for a solution that puts you back on top. That's the harder path, and it's the one Jesus was actually describing. The goal isn't to protect yourself from ever being wronged again. The goal is to protect yourself from becoming someone whose heart is governed by bitterness and the need to settle scores. Tithing. The common reaction to tithing, even among some Christians, is that it feels like an obligation, a church budget item dressed up in spiritual language. But the deeper logic of tithing isn't about filling a collection plate. It's about what happens inside the person who gives. When you consistently give the first portion of what you earn, you're making a very deliberate statement with your actions. You're saying that money doesn't own you, that your security doesn't depend entirely on what you accumulate, that there's something you trust more than your bank account. That's an extraordinarily countercultural posture in a world that constantly tells you to hold tighter, earn more, and never let go. Tithing isn't really a financial transaction. It's a repeated act of keeping your hands open rather than clenched, training yourself over time to trust something bigger than your own income. Women should remain silent in the church. This gets quoted in two directions constantly, either as a hard rule to enforce or as proof that Paul was simply wrong about everything. Both reactions miss the context entirely. The early church wasn't an organized Sunday service with a pulpit and assigned seating. It was a community gathering more like an open forum, where people spoke, asked questions, and discussed. In that culture, women had little formal education. For them to interject with questions mid-teaching was considered disruptive and socially disrespectful. Not because women's voices didn't matter, but because of how it read in that specific cultural context. Paul's instruction was about order in a specific gathering, in a specific city. We know it wasn't a blanket silencing because earlier in the same letter, Paul gives instructions on how women should prophesy and pray in the assembly. He wasn't removing their voice. He was addressing a disruptive behavior that was causing problems in one particular church, the cross. In Rome, the cross wasn't a beautiful symbol. It was a device reserved for the worst of criminals, for slaves, for enemies of the state. It was designed to be as physically devastating and publicly humiliating as possible, a warning from the empire. This is what happens to those who defy us. Roman citizens would have recoiled at the idea of wearing one as jewelry. So when the early Christians chose the cross as the central symbol of their faith, it was a radical act of reinterpretation. They were taking the thing that was meant to represent ultimate defeat and ultimate shame, and saying that through this man, through this death, it has been turned into the ultimate victory. The instrument of punishment became the instrument of redemption. That reversal isn't an accident of history. It's the entire point of the gospel. Fear of God. This phrase makes modern people uncomfortable because it sounds like the kind of religion where you spend your life terrified that one wrong move will bring down divine punishment. But that's a significant misreading of what the Bible means when it uses fear in this context. Biblical fear of God isn't the same as being afraid of someone who might hurt you. It's closer to the weight you feel in the presence of someone whose opinion of you genuinely matters, someone you admire deeply, someone whose character you respect. You wouldn't want to hurt that person. You wouldn't walk away from them looking for ways to take advantage of their kindness. That awareness you feel around them, that reverence for who they are and what they stand for, that's what the Bible means by fearing God. Not dread, not anxiety about punishment, a deep, loving reverence that shapes how you live because you care about not grieving the person you love most. Fasting. Giving up food or comfort or something you genuinely enjoy as a spiritual practice seems strange on the surface, maybe even a little self-punishing. But the logic behind fasting becomes very clear when you look at it directly. The human body is full of impulses and appetites and needs that constantly demand to be satisfied. Hunger says eat. Tiredness says rest. Desire says indulge. Fasting is a deliberate decision to say to one of those impulses, not right now. Not because the need isn't real, but because you are not its slave. It's a practice of demonstrating to yourself that your spiritual will is stronger than your physical appetite, at least for a period of time. There's something genuinely powerful about discovering that you can say no to something your body insists it needs and come out the other side intact. Fasting isn't punishment. It's training. The same way an athlete builds muscle through voluntary resistance, fasting builds the interior discipline that shows up when real difficulty arrives. Love your enemies. This might be the single hardest teaching in the entire New Testament. Love the people who have genuinely hurt you, lied about you, worked against you. It sounds naive or impossible depending on what you've been through. But the love Jesus was calling for isn't a feeling. It's not pretending the hurt didn't happen, or manufacturing warm emotions towards someone who has been cruel. The Greek word used is agape, which isn't romantic love or sentimental affection. It's a deliberate, willed orientation toward the good of another person even when they don't deserve it. It means you don't celebrate their suffering. You don't dedicate mental energy to fantasizing about their downfall. You treat them as a human being made in the image of God, even when they haven't acted like one toward you. That's not weakness. That's arguably one of the most spiritually advanced and genuinely difficult things a person can be asked to do. And Jesus knew exactly what he was asking for when he said it.